So we're going to take a look at Chapter 5 and revisit this idea of literary analysis and a literary annotation. If you can find your signpost bookmark, that's great. If not, there are several resources available. But to dig deeper into the text, these are going to help you kind of spot or point out or dig deeper into what's going on with the characters and the development and the plot and the symbolism and those bigger themes. As I read, I'm not going to stop on every page necessarily. I'm not going to mark every tiny word. But I am going to be looking out for these big things, the contrasts and the contradictions, where things don't make sense to me. Moments where characters have a realization about something. That's going to definitely tap into characterization and these tough questions where a character is struggling with something. Words of the wiser, those moments where people are giving advice, maybe older, maybe not, that can apply to a life situation. This idea of again and again and things being repeated, and memory moments. What's the purpose of that memory? What is it serving to give us background information on a character? I'm going to be looking at these things as I read this chapter. Beast from the water. The tide was coming in, and there was only a narrow strip of firm beach between the water and the white, stumbling stuff near the palm terrace. Ralph chose the firm strip as a path because he needed to think, and only here could he allow his feet to move without having to watch them. Suddenly, pacing by the water, he was overcome with astonishment. He found himself understanding the wearisome of this life, where every path was an improvisation and a considerable part of one's waking life was spent watching one's feet. He stopped, facing the strip, and remembering that the first enthusiastic exploration, as though it were a part of a brighter childhood. He smiled jeeringly. He turned and then walked back toward the platform with the sun in his face. The time had come for the assembly, and as he walked into the concealing splendors of the sunlight, he went carefully over the points of his speech. There must be no mistake about this assembly, no chasing imagery. So in this paragraph, we get a lot of insight into Ralph's character. I was struck by this, where it said he found himself understanding. So I'm going to go back and mark that. The wearisome of this life. This life is pretty important because this is a different life than anything that he's experienced. And he found an understanding. This is an aha moment. Ralph now kind of understands what he needs to do. He's figuring out that he is in a different world and in a different place, where every path was an improvisation and a considerable part of one's waking life was spent watching one's feet. Your feet move you. Your feet lead you to the next thing. That's how you move forward, right? Feet move forward. These are my notes. This is what the annotations are looking like. I'm also struck by this word suddenly. That is one of the ideas between an aha moment. If you look back in your notes, that's one of the keywords to look for aha moments. There's a couple of different other pieces in here. There's some imagery in here, the sunlight. He turned then and walked backward toward the platform with the sun in his face. Maybe he's been enlightened. Now, as you can see in my note, this is not another page of written words. It makes sense to me. I know this is an aha moment, so I can go back and dig further into it. This phrase, and if I were going to do a sentence, phrase, word activity, this sun in his face might be a good thing to pull out as a phrase because there's a lot that can be said in this. In this realization, he now has an enlightenment. Then I'll go on. He lost himself in a maze of thoughts that were rendered vague by his lack of words to express them. Frowning, he tried again. This meeting must not be fun, but business. Notice that Golding put this in one sentence all by itself. In literary terms, we call this structure. Pay attention for things like this, places where Golding may stop to separate parts. A lot of you missed in this book, in the previous readings, at the end of chapter 3, this part about Simon. Golding separated this. Simon is a whole little section is about Simon. Very few of you marked this in any way as being, why is that there? Why did Golding choose to highlight Simon in this small part of this chapter at the end? Pay attention to things like that. So as you continue to read chapter 5, use your bookmark. Think about these things as you read. This is going to get you to a deeper literary analysis.